students, continuing with providing you video lectures on the important questions which could be asked in the forthcoming examinations by Guru Nanak Dev University. I present before you the new economic policy of Lenin, which comes under the topic Russian Revolution. See, we've already discussed the February Revolution. I have a video lecture on that. I have a video lecture on the October Revolution of 1917, and both can be assessed by you, right? Now, the third question, which I feel is important under the Russian Revolution, is the Lenin's new economic policy. So, what are we going to do? We are going to do the background of this new economic policy, something about the war communism, about the civil war in Russia. Then what were the reasons why this new economic policy was adopted? What were the aims? What were its features? What was the impact? And what do the historians think of this policy? So let's just dive into the topic, Lenin's new economic policy. Right. Now, something which is like a background to this question. I've also taught classes for the history honors, and one of the paper used to be on the Russian Revolution. So, although we used to do a great detail on that, it used to be like just this Russian Revolution into one paper. So, obviously, in this particular class in which you're in the undergraduate course doing history. In Russian Revolution, we only talk about the February, we talk about the October, we talk about the impact of the revolution and the Lenin's economic policy. But now, if I just tell you a little bit about this, now after October Revolution, or what we called as the Bolshevik Revolution, there was a civil war in Russia between the forces who favored the Bolsheviks and the forces which were anti-Bolsheviks. So during this civil war, Lenin adopted certain very stringent, strict measures which he termed as the war communism. These methods, these policies, programs were adopted to win in the civil war. So obviously the war communism, what did it actually say? Basically, Lenin wanted to have the entire resources under him so that he is in a position to kind of work with these resources and will be able to emerge victorious in the civil war. Peasants जो है, even despite producing surplus, were not allowed to sell. The industries were given in the hands of the workers, but now at this moment, he could see that how there was a complete economic anarchy in Russia. And to do away with this complete economic disorder, complete economic anarchy, the new economic policy was the need of the hour. Number two thing, now this economic policy will have partial capitalism in it. So, of course, in the new economic policy, Lenin, despite being a communist, adopted capitalism for some time so as to give a reboost to the Russian economy, right? So, I'll just have my pointer. Right. So Lenin was a very far-sighted and a realistic leader. When he had to kind of repress his opponents, he adopted war communism. But after the victory in the civil war, now he was afraid of the deteriorating economic conditions of Russia. He very well knew that the economic policy should be immediately changed so as to pacify the discontented masses. So in March 1921, Lenin said, "We are in a condition of such poverty, ruin, and exhaustion of the productive powers of the workers and peasants that everything must be set aside to increase production." So thus he adopted the new economic policy in March 1921, which continued till 1928, and later when Stalin came into power, he introduced the 5 years plan, which even India has adopted these 5-year plans from Russia. Right. Now, an eminent historian, Lipson, what does he say? He says that there was an alarming decline in the production, together with the peasant outbreaks, the revolt of the sailors, that all forced Lenin in 1921 to adopt the new economic policy. Now, however, Lenin did not adopt this policy on his own. He believed in creating a consensus on that. So he held talks with the peasants and the workers and carefully read their letter in the newspaper Bednot, and then adopted the new economic policy and the methods for implementing it. Now, so my second thing, or I would say, okay, we've talked about the background to this new economic policy. Now, why was this new economic policy adopted? You know that there is a complete economic disorder. The production is all-time low. The agriculture production is all-time low. So you could also, think about it that the new economic policy was the only way to reboost the Russian economy. So one, this was in order to win back the peasants who opposed Bolsheviks during the period of war communism. It was adopted to end the economic differences between the workers and the peasant. Then the Russian peasant wanted to sell their production freely. However, this was not allowed during the war communism. The policy was adopted to remove the economic discontent on one side and to improve the economic health of the country. Now, management of the industries was given to the League of Workers during the war communism. However, this did not get along with the economic production because the production had gone down. So at this moment, the new economic policy was adopted to overhaul the economic system. Sorry. Right. Now, lastly, the policy was adopted so as to give the individual economic freedom to the people of Russia. Now, what were the aims of the new economic policy? What did Lenin aimed while he adopted this policy? One, see, he wanted to strengthen the economic contribution of the workers and the peasants. No country can progress if its workers and peasants do not contribute. So one thing, through his new economic policy, he wanted to strengthen the economic contribution of the workers and the peasants. Number two, he wanted to promote such programs and methods through which production could be increased. Number three, to kind of end the discontent among the peasants. And number four, to allow partial capitalism while keeping the main sources of economy in the hands of the government. Fifth, to encourage the workers to improve the economy. Now, since we know that being a communist, he had to now get some capitalism in the economy. Some partial capitalism was to be a part of the Russian economy. So Lenin said, adoption of NEP is taking one step backward to take two steps forward. So that is what he said, that adoption of new economic policy is taking one step backward so as to take two steps forward. Right. So we have done the causes why he wanted to do that. He wanted to win back the peasant. He wanted to end the economic production, increase the production. He wanted the peasants to sell their production freely, to remove the discontent. The industries should be managed in a better way to give individual economic freedom. We did the aims to strengthen the economic contribution of the workers and peasants, to promote such programs through which production can be increased, to end the discontent among the peasants, to allow partial capitalism, to encourage the workers to improve. But how was this to be done? That's very important. That was his aim. That's what he wanted to do. But what were the features of this? One, the regeneration of the agriculture, nationalization of the agriculture, collective farming, beginning of the private trade, nationalization of the industries, reforms in currency, loans to industrial units, new labor code, special concessions to small-scale industries. So this is how he wanted to achieve the overhauling of the Russian economy. So let's just do these features one by one. So first is the regeneration of the agriculture. Now, under the new economic policy, all the compulsory procurement of the surplus yield of the peasant was stopped, and they were allowed to sell it in the open market. Now, during the period of war communism, all the surplus production of the peasant was to be taken by the government, and it was compulsory for the peasant to give their surplus produce to the government. But now that ended, they were permitted to sell their surplus production in the open market. So that means retail trading started, and the retail traders made market transactions with a view to earn profit. Now, so as to earn profit, they will increase their production. See, now in agriculture, there were actually two type of revolutions. All right, just hold on. Right now, there were two type of revolutions. One, government nationalized agriculture. They did away with the landlords. So government, what did they do? They redistributed the land from the landlords and redistributed that land among the peasants. And this is what the Russian peasants were asking for: the land reform. The land reform was to redistribute the land from the landlords and to redistribute it among the peasants. यानी कि landlord से लेके आपने वो land जो है अब peasants को दे दिया. Now, how was this done? ये तो एक law बन गया. How was it done? The first change was brought by circulating order, through which government decided to redistribute land. This increased their holding by 1/3. However, no change was done in their status. So the land was given to them, their land increased by 1/3. However, their status remained the same. Now comes the second agriculture revolution. So first they nationalized agriculture. They did away with the landlords, and landlords का जो extra land है, that was redistributed among the peasant by a government order. Their land increased by 1/3. Number two was the second agriculture revolution, which took place 10 years after this, and that was when the land was taken from the individual peasants and handed over to the cooperatives. Now, how was this second change brought? It was brought by two factors. First, they feared that these rich peasants may not bring about capitalism. Secondly, they felt that Russia has suffered scarcity of food grains, and they had to import wheat and also introduce rationing. So they wanted that nobody should have the monopoly of the grains in Russia. That is why they wanted the land from the individual peasants to the cooperatives now. Number two, they nationalized agriculture. Now, Russian government, with a view to increase the agriculture production, opted for the nationalization of agriculture. What did they do? The government opened large farms under which barren and infertile land was brought under cultivation. Peasants were given the financial facilities. The work progressed so fast that by 1929-30, more than half of the farms had been collectivized. So that means nationalization का मतलब होता है बच्चे, यहाँ पर the whole agriculture land was brought under the government, and because of that they could bring the barren and infertile land under cultivation. Peasants were given financial facilities to do that, and so by this time the agriculture production, the agriculture land had increased manyfold. But of course, if you critically analyze this, it also turned many farmers into rebels. The government failed to procure machines in required number for all the collective farms. Now, number three is the collective farming. Now, see, what is collective farming, or which we call as the cooperative farming? Cooperative farming is when you kind of pool in your resources, and the yield is also divided among the farmers. So there were different type of cooperative farming. Now, collective farming meant to bring together the farms of several peasants under the cooperative management, and there were three types of cooperative farming done in Russia. Now, in the first class, what was there? Peasant जो है, they pooled their land, that is jointly they owned the lands. They performed all the agriculture operations jointly, and whatever the produce was, that was shared. However, most important, agriculture tools and cattle were owned individually. So in the first example क्या है बच्चे कि उन्होंने अपना लैंड इकट्ठा कर दिया, एग्रीकल्चर ऑपरेशंस इकट्ठे कर दिए, जो प्रोड्यूस आया उस लैंड के ऊपर उसको भी शेयर कर दिया, लेकिन इस फर्स्ट क्लास में कैटल और एग्रीकल्चर टूल्स जो है वो सबके अपने अपने ओन्ड इंडिविजुअली था. Second were called as the airtels. In this, land और labor के बजाय जो है capital was also equally shared, and the yield was also shared. Now, communes were a type of cooperative where everything was shared. That means house, cattle, implements, they were all collective property, and farmers got their requirement from the joint stock. Now, so by collectivization of agriculture, the Bolshevik government took a big step in the direction of socialism. Now, in the first 5-year plan, that is 1928 to 32. Now, although by 28, this plan, the new economic policy was over, and then it was taken over by the 5-year plans. But of course, that this had a great impact then as well. About 150,000 peasant families were organized into approximately 2 lakh farms. By 1937, the membership of the collective farms rose to about approximately 2 crore peasant families, which is 93%, and these collective farms owned about approximately 4 lakh tractors, 1 lakh harvester combines, and 1 lakh trucks. So Soviet Union became a country with a large scale agriculture production. Now imagine what was happening during the time of war communism. They did not have the grains. The peasants were not producing enough because they were not motivated to produce that much. So one impact of the new economic policy was that Soviet Union became a country with a large scale agriculture production. Number 4, beginning of the private trade. Now, under the new economic policy, the peasants were allowed to sell their surplus in the open market. That means private enterprise on a small scale was allowed. Private retail trading was allowed on a small scale. The policy encouraged the private trade and hence improved the conditions of the peasant. See, for example, if I tell you, I give the same example in the class as well, that if one of you scores about 80 out of 100 marks in history, and I tell you that okay, you can keep 50 and the rest of the marks I will be redistributing among the people who have secured less. I don't think next time you'll be in a motivated state to learn more and to write better, because you know that your marks will be redistributed or you will not get the surplus marks. The same was happening with the peasant. They stopped producing the agriculture because they knew that the extra surplus was taken by the government. But this private trade improved the conditions of the peasant. Private trading by the farmers deprived the Nar Comprod or the Commissariat of Supplies of its monopoly to collect and distribute the agriculture produce. During the time of the war communism, this was the agency which was taking care of the agriculture produce, but now under the new economic policy, the peasants were given the opportunity to sell their surplus in the market. That is nationalization of the industries. Now you would say that if they nationalized, how would they have progress? See, they did not nationalize the entire industries, and sometimes the heavy industries needs to be nationalized because private players may not be in a position to invest that much of money, right? So for raising the level of production of the war material, the rapid industrialization was a must. but unfortunately, Russia had very few heavy machines and very little capital. Now, in November 1917, the Bolshevik government issued an order and put an end to the ownership of factories by these capitalists. This is before the NEP. They decided to constitute the management boards to run the factories, but these boards failed. That means now, before the new economic policy in 1917, they put an end to the capitalism. उन्होंने क्या किया बच्चे, सारे ये जो फैक्ट्रीज है they were given to these management boards which consisted of the workers. They were to run the factories, but these workers failed miserably. So under the new economic policy, very important, they decided to continue capitalism but with nationalism. That means some industries will be under the government control, but of course they will allow capitalism to improve the economic conditions. Now, government not only controlled large industries, but also permitted a certain degree of decentralization. Now, factories producing the same goods were brought under one head. For example, the textile mills, jitni bhi mills jo hai, they are producing clothes, they were put under a central organization called as the syndicate or the trust. Right? So all such syndicates were constituted for iron, steel, paper, sugar and chemical industries, and then these syndicates were put under a central business organization. So all the industries now worked in full cooperation with one another. Now the new economic policy transformed the economy. Now if you could just see that about the coal production, which in 1922 was about 1 crore tons, now went on to approximately 2 crore 45 lakh tons in 1925-26. The production of the cotton textiles also doubled. The Soviet government paid more attention to the development of large industries, especially heavy industries. Old industries were renovated and the new ones were built. Right? Then is reforms in the currency. See, no economic policy can benefit the country if there are no reforms in the currency. So the new economic policy also made reforms in the currency and brought about stability in the economy. Now, during the Civil War, currency had been completely devalued. Therefore, in 1922, the government bank was authorized to issue shavnits, that is the government notes of the value of 10 gold rubles. So overall the economy of Russia improved. Now, where did the capital for the business come from? It actually came from the amount of the profit put up in the Reserve Bank. There were loans advanced by the factories, by the government banks, and the state helped. So overall the currency improved. There was money which could be raised for the industrialization, right? The money which came from the profits from these Reserve Bank, the loans which were given by the state banks and the state help. Right? Now, some more thing about the reforms in currency. Now, according to new economic policy, they fixed the proportion of the profits earned by the mills and the workers. So that means new economic policy did not actually bring about capitalism on an 100% scale, but yes, maybe at about 50 to 60% so as to overhaul the economic status. So they said कि जो भी profits are being earned by the mills and the factories, one part of that profit will be put up in the reserve fund of the factory. The rest will be spent on the education, medical care and other welfare activities. So that means the business in Russia now aimed at the progress of country, public interest and the workers' welfare. Now, for the industrial progress, a branch of Communist Party was established in every factory which saw that no worker, no technician is propagating against the Bolshevik revolution. So as a result, overall, the industrial production of the country increased. The task of laying the pipeline from Grozny in Caucasus to Topaz port and from Baku to Batumi for increasing the production of of the mineral oil was completed in the given time, and the production in the government industrial units also tripled that in 1923 as compared to 1920. Right. Loans were given to the industrial units. In 1922, the government also opened the Bank of Industry, Prombank, so as to give loans to these industrial units, so as to increase the industrial production in the country. Then you have the new labor code was established. See, you cannot bring about the economic overhaul if you do not improve the labor conditions. So a new labor code was set up in 1923, under which, number one, provision of compulsory labor was improved. The wages of the laborers were fixed, their working hours were fixed as the 8 hours, and the worker were also granted 2 leaves on full payment in an year. So the new labor policy improved the condition of the laborers, thereby strengthened the economic system in Russia. Now, special concessions to the small-scale industries. They encouraged the foreign firms to set up industries in Russia. The government granted licenses to 4,000 small-scale industries. Right. So before I start with the effect, let's just quickly revise what we have done from the features. Right. So we did first the regeneration of the agriculture. Compulsory procurement of the surplus production was stopped, and the peasant could sell them in the open market. So there were 2 revolutions. One where the land was taken away from the landlord and given to the peasants, and the other revolution took place after 10 years, where the land from the individual peasant was taken over and given to the cooperatives. Right. The agriculture was nationalized, so large, barren, infertile land was brought under cultivation. Financial facilities were also given to them. Collective farming was done. There were 3 kinds of farms in which the farms were collected, and collective farming was an important step towards the production increase in the agriculture production, and Soviet Union became a country with a large scale agriculture production. Then is a beginning of a private trade. Now, under the new economic policy, the peasants were allowed to sell their surplus in the open market. Private enterprise was allowed. Private retail trading was allowed. Then is nationalization of the industries. Now, during the Bolshevik Revolution in November 1917, the government had ended the monopoly by the capitalists, and rather they constituted the management boards to run the factories. But now, under the new economic policy, the government decided to continue capitalism. Now, the factories producing same goods were brought under one head, which was known as the syndicate or the trust, and all these syndicates were made for iron, steel, paper, sugar and chemical industries, and they were put up under the Central Business Organization. So all the industries worked in cooperation, and production just doubled, tripled during this period. Right. Then there were reforms in the currency. The currency had gone completely devalued, right? So in 1922, the government bank was authorized to issue shavanets, which was the government notes of value of 10 gold rubles, right? There were reforms in the currency that whatever profits that the mill workers were earning, one part of one part of the profit was to be put up in the reserve fund of the factory. The rest was to be spent on the education, medical care and the welfare activities. Right. Industrial progress के लिए they just established a branch of Communist Party in every factory, so that there is no revolution against the Bolshevik revolution. So because there was no revolution, industrial production also increased, right? That is, the loans were given to these industrial units, the new labor code where their conditions were improved, wages were improved, their working hours were fixed to 8 hours, they were granted 2 weeks leave on a full payment in a year. Special concessions were given to the small scale industries. So this is what was the features of the new economic policy. Now, what was the impact? One, as most important, it led to the increase in the industrial production, and which further led to the development of industrial development. Trade prospered because of the efforts of the private sector. It also brought about a new life in the agriculture, which improved the conditions of the peasant. It led to the economic development. In 1933, when there was an economic depression in the world, Russia was the only country which was unaffected by the Depression. Then Russia became powerful and reached the pre-war level. When an important European historian says Russia's economic life came to present a strange picture of intermingled state socialism and state capitalism, right? So if I may just kind of give you a quick summary, just for a quick revision. Now, Lenin's NEP consisted of series of reforms aimed at bringing political and economic stability to the country. It went a long way in pacifying the various economic sections and the interest. It also allowed growth of private enterprise and capitalism to please the Russian peasant. He was permitted to sell their products for profit, guaranteed their personal property, and allowed them to employ labor. Then it also allowed private retail trade under certain conditions. Similarly, private capitalists were allowed to open factories which employed less than 20 workers. That is, the foreign investors were allowed to invest their capital in Russia. Incentives like higher wages for improved production were offered to the laborers. Strikes in factories were banned. Strict discipline was imposed. A new currency was introduced on the basis of the gold standard, right? So there is this very beautiful quote by Hayes and Moon. They say the new economic policy was neither socialism nor capitalism, but temporary mixture of both. Lipson, I think I've already done with you. An alarming decline in production, together with the peasant outbreak and revolt of the sailors in the Soviet fleet, forced Lenin in 1921 to adopt the new economic policy. So this is what I have for you in the new economic policy. It is slightly tough because sometimes in history, when you have the economic aspect, it becomes a little difficult. But I would say that just go through these slides one or two times, then go back to your textbook, read from there. I am quite sure that the topic will be crystal clear to you. So thank you so much for watching this video. Shine like a star always, and all the best for your exams. Thank you.